question is, what is subluxation? And that's been a quandary in chiropractic for a long time. Subluxation is, from a technical point of view, less than a dislocation, but it's not where it should be, right? The joint has been altered. In order for that to happen, it has to have some kind of an injury. That injury could be a lot of little injuries over time, but it's created an instability and a sloppiness that allows that joint to go out of place. It affects everything in the neighborhood, but it also can affect everything else, right? If it's a problem in your lower back, it's going to affect the mechanics of your entire spine, but it's also going to affect the entire lower body in that. So if my first vertebra goes out because the doctor turned my head and ripped me out of the birth canal and created a little kinking in my C1 and C2 rotations, and they're locked in that position, according to biomechanics, the problem becomes worse as I'm developing and I start to stand up and walk, because the first 4 vertebra and the last 4 vertebra are what we call homologs. And so if C1 goes out, L5 has to mimic it in order for us to be able to walk. So now we got a problem at both ends, but it has to do that because they work together to create what we call ambulation, the ability to walk. Putting that bone out of place, it also creates other fixations and misalignments in order to accommodate for it. If my head is like this, I got to start to reshuffle and reshift in order to get my eyes level with the horizon, and then that is how I'm going to be living for a long time until something changes. The problem is gravity's our enemy, and when it changes, it usually gets worse, not better. But what does it do? What does subluxation do to us? It affects the ability of those things to move, including those fixations, so we're limiting play. So the joints tend to lose nutrition. Remember when we talked about movement and that nutrition, that the joints are dependent upon movement for the nutrition, and they have to get to end of range in order to get more than half of that nutrition. And so if I'm locked out and I can't go in one direction but I can go in the other, that I'm not able to get to all the ends of range of all the joints in my body. Also, stuff starts to pool around it. It may put pressure and tension on the spinal cord. It can change its biomechanical positioning and put a stretch on the spinal cord, which will, over a long period of time, is disaster. A lot of the spasticities that we experience are because of that very thing. If it goes out long enough, it also changes the mechanics of whatever. Like if it's in the neck, it changes the mechanics of the upper body, and so now I'll go from a neck problem in my early youth to now I'm starting to get a shoulder and elbow problem, and then later on down the road I'm winding up with pressure on multiple areas of the nerve, and I got carpal tunnel syndrome. But it started here, not there. And so all of these things can have a radically negative impact. Now let's talk about the brain. The primary driver of the brain, the level of frequency, is the body. Your body receives gravity. When you wake up in the morning, you can't think, smell, taste. You stand up and all of a sudden gravity pulls down on you. And as it pulls down on you, it stretches the muscles. And as it stretches the muscles, those little muscle spindle fibers that I talk a lot about, they send radical amounts of information up to the cerebellum. So the stuff that's on the right goes to the right cerebellum, stuff that's on the left goes to the left. And that cerebellum on the right drives the left cortex, and the one that's on the left drives the right cortex. And so that's that's the impact that the body has. We'll imagine that we have asymmetries of activity in that, and so now all of a sudden we're not getting the same level of drive. We're getting one side that's overdriving, one side that's underdriving. Now let's talk about the joints themselves, right? The joints aren't functioning the way they should, and their movement patterns are sending signals up to the cerebellum. If they're starting to lose ability to move, they're decreasing the understanding of what's going on in your lower body. They're decreasing also the drive on that cerebellum and its ability to do its job. And we do this all the time. I have somebody say, well, I really don't have a problem. I say, okay, well, let's check you out. And I have them do some walking drills. And we see, oh, look, you're kind of leaning to the left. You got this problem and that problem. And then I just literally take and adjust the ankle, just really easily, one-dimensionally, adjust the ankle, adjust the knee, adjust the hip, adjust the lower back real quick, and they stand up and walk different. They walk better. I said, yes. Then I do the other side, and they walk even better. And now they're getting a better rotation of shoulders and hips. Why? The major reason is not the biomechanics, although it is heavily changed, right? The real reason is I've got radical amounts of information coming from the joints of the body, and the cerebellum is able to give a refined response to what's going on down there. Yeah, that's pretty heavy, and that's a graduate level understanding of how that system functions and how it works. And imagine that over time, the worse that stuff gets, the more my drive on my cerebellum goes down, and therefore the drive on my brain goes down. And wow, I'm just having trouble remembering stuff now. Yeah, a lot of aging is that imbalances, lack of function that truly drives the brain and keeps it awake, alert, alive, and functional. So if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Okay, so hopefully that gives you the answer to your question. If you have any more questions, please ask. And remember, we're here when you're ready to take your life back.